The Whisper in the Stars. The chamber of the Galactic Council was silent, yet the silence was not peace. It was heavy, thick, filled with unspoken fear. Thousands of alien delegates sat in curved rows under the great dome of the council hall. Each one belonged to a race that had lived for thousands of years. Some had survived ancient wars, some had mastered the flow of stars, and some had built empires that stretched across galaxies. But all of them had gathered today for one reason. A voice broke the silence. It was the voice of an elder, scaled and ancient. His eyes glowed with the pale fire of wisdom and dread. "We face a danger unlike any before," he said. "This is not a weapon, not an army, not an empire." His words echoed across the chamber, shaking the nerves of the listeners. "This danger wears a human face." The aliens shifted uncomfortably. For countless years they had watched humanity from a distance. They knew humans as fragile creatures of flesh and bone, yet they also knew humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of miracles when pushed to the edge. Wars had been lost against them, traps had failed, and empires had fallen simply because humans refused to surrender. But this time, the whispers were not about human strength or courage. They were about something far stranger. "He asks questions," another delegate said. Her voice was sharp like glass. "He does not fear forbidden places. He does not respect boundaries. He sees a locked door, and he must open it. He sees silence, and he must break it. This is the one we must fear." The chamber grew restless. Delegates hissed, growled, and muttered to one another. Questions rose like smoke. Why fear a human who only asks? Some demanded, "What danger is there in curiosity?" But the elder raised his clawed hand, and silence fell again. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward. "Because curiosity is not harmless," he said. "Curiosity is a spark. It burns through rules. It melts chains. It creates fire where none existed. We control this galaxy with silence, with fear, with barriers of knowledge that no one dares to cross. But this human, he crosses them without hesitation." The council screens flickered to life, showing images of a man. His name was Elias, a young human explorer with no crown, no army, no empire. He stood among ruins of an abandoned planet, staring at broken machines older than all known civilizations. His expression was not fear, but wonder. The delegates watched as he touched carvings, asked questions aloud, and wrote notes as if he could unravel truths the galaxy had buried for ages. "This is the one," the elder hissed. "He is the danger we whisper about. For if he learns, others will learn. If one human dares to ask, others will follow. If curiosity spreads, no empire will remain safe." The chamber trembled with unease. One delegate slammed his fist against the table. "He is only one man," he shouted. "How can one human threaten the galaxy?" The elder turned his burning eyes toward him. "You do not understand," he said coldly. "Weapons kill bodies, but curiosity kills empires. It is not the man we fear. It is the fire he carries within, fire that spreads without end." The silence that followed was more terrible than noise. Every alien in the chamber felt the weight of those words. Some remembered the wars of old when humans had stood against impossible odds and somehow survived. Others recalled how humans had risen from weak beginnings to challenge powers that thought themselves untouchable. And now, one human threatened them not with violence, but with questions. Across the galaxy, stories were already spreading. Rumors of a human who entered forbidden worlds, who uncovered truths that no one dared to seek. His crew feared him yet followed him. His enemies tried to stop him yet failed. Wherever he went, silence was broken, and secrets came alive. The elder spoke again, his voice a whisper now. "The galaxy has always feared fire. We thought weapons were the greatest flame. We thought armies were the strongest storm. But now we see the truth. The most dangerous thing in the universe is not destruction. It is curiosity, and humans carry it like no other." The words echoed long after the council dismissed. Each delegate carried the fear back to their worlds. They warned their leaders, they strengthened their borders. Yet, deep inside, they all knew it was useless, because curiosity could not be caged, and a human had already set it free. In the cold darkness of space, the stars seemed to whisper. They did not whisper of war fleets or super weapons. They whispered of a single human, standing against silence, daring to ask what no one else would. And in that whisper, the galaxy trembled. A human with endless questions. Elias was not born different from other humans. He was raised on a colony world far from the heart of Earth. His childhood marked by endless skies and the hum of old machines, while other children played games and followed rules. Elias always asked why things worked the way they did, why the stars shone, why the ships flew, why ancient ruins scattered across his planet were locked away behind government barriers. To most adults, his questions were foolish and irritating, but to Elias they were the heartbeat of life itself. He believed every answer led to another mystery, and every mystery was an invitation to step further into the unknown. From the very beginning, he carried a fire that no one could extinguish. When Elias grew older, his questions only multiplied. He studied maps, legends, and ancient reports. He searched through forgotten libraries where digital dust had collected over centuries. And while most explorers accepted the limits written by law and tradition, Elias refused when officials said, "Do not go there." His mind instantly asked, "What are they hiding?" When they said, "No one is allowed to know," he replied with, "Then I must be the one to know." Curiosity was not a hobby for him. It was his very nature. He could not rest until he discovered the truth. Many times his crew tried to stop him. They were loyal men and women who respected him, but they feared his relentless drive on their journeys through star systems. They often landed on planets abandoned by time, where alien empires had left ruins buried under sand or ice. His crew would beg him to turn back, warning him that the ruins were cursed or forbidden. But Elias always walked forward with light in his eyes, his hands tracing old carvings, his voice whispering questions into the air as though the universe itself would answer. What unsettled the aliens most was not just his boldness, but the strange effect his curiosity had on others. Those who worked with him began to ask questions too. They started noticing lies told by their governments. They started wondering what truths had been buried beneath layers of silence. It was as though curiosity itself was a flame that spread from his heart into the hearts of those around him. A fire that could not be put out once it began to burn. His name began to spread in whispers across trading stations and council archives. "The human Elias," they said. "The one who ignores boundaries." Stories of him reached alien worlds where scholars kept libraries sealed under lock and oath. They heard of the human who entered forbidden places, who studied things no one dared to study, who uncovered secrets hidden for millennia. What made them tremble was not the discoveries themselves, but the idea that he was willing to ask questions no alien had dared to ask in thousands of years. One day, his ship landed on a forgotten moon orbiting a dying star. The surface was barren and lifeless, but buried beneath the dust were structures older than any recorded empire. The aliens had long declared the place untouchable, warning that it carried curses of the ancients, but Elias only smiled as he stepped out. For him, curses were nothing but unanswered questions. While his crew waited in fear, Elias moved among the ruins, touching their surfaces, studying their marks, speaking softly to himself, and every time he asked, "Why was this left here?" or "What happened to those who built it?" the ruins seemed to echo back with faint vibrations, as if they were waiting for someone like him to come. Back on the council worlds, the whispers grew louder. The Galactic Council began to panic, for they realized that Elias's curiosity was not just dangerous because of what he might discover, but because of the ripple it sent across the galaxy. One curious human might awaken 10 others. 10 might awaken 100. And soon the silence that had kept alien empires safe for ages would shatter. The council leaders remembered wars they had fought, weapons they had crushed, rebellions they had ended. But never in their long history had they fought against curiosity itself. And curiosity was not a fleet that could be destroyed, or a rebellion that could be silenced. It was a spark that spread unseen. Elias never considered himself a threat. He was not a warrior, not a king, not even a leader. He was simply a man who wanted to know, but in a galaxy ruled by fear and silence. That simple desire made him more dangerous than any weapon ever built. Every day he asked more questions, and with every question the galaxy grew more unstable. For truths long buried could not remain hidden forever, and the more Elias searched, the closer he came to uncovering something that would shake the universe to its very core. The aliens watching him began to understand what the council elder had warned. They saw that his questions were not only uncovering ruins and machines, but also breaking the chains of silence that had bound entire civilizations. Once a mind tasted the fire of curiosity, it could never go back to the dark. And Elias was spreading that fire with every step, with every discovery, with every word. And so, in the stillness of distant space, as Elias stood before the silent stones of the forgotten moon, the galaxy itself seemed to lean closer, listening to the human who dared to ask what no one else would ask. The human whose endless questions would soon awaken truths the universe had buried in fear, truths that even the Galactic Council had prayed would never rise again. The forbidden discovery, the dying star burned weakly above the ruined planet, casting a red glow across endless deserts of broken stone and rusted metal. For centuries the world had been sealed off by alien decree, its name erased from maps, its skies patrolled by warning buoys that declared it a place of death. The galaxy had decided long ago that no one should walk there, not because the air was poison or the soil was cursed, but because of what lay buried beneath the sand. For the ruins on this world were older than any empire, older than memory itself, and to know them was to risk unraveling truths the galaxy could not bear to face. Yet Elias walked across its surface with steady steps, his boots sinking into dust that no one had disturbed for thousands of years. His crew followed at a distance. Their eyes filled with dread, they begged him to stop. They whispered of the legends told about this world, of ships that had vanished, of minds that had broken after glimpsing the ancient machines. But Elias only smiled faintly, his eyes bright with the fire of wonder. "If they vanished, there must be a reason," he said. "If minds broke, then there is something hidden that was too great for them to hold. And if something is hidden, then it must be found." His words chilled his crew, but nothing could stop him. The ruins rose before him like the bones of giants, towers half buried in sand, walls carved with patterns that shimmered faintly as though the stone remembered light from another age. As Elias ran his hands across the carvings, the symbols glowed softly, lines of pale blue racing across the surfaces. His crew gasped, fearing the awakening of powers long sealed, but Elias only leaned closer, whispering questions to the stone itself. "What were you? Who built you? Why were you abandoned?" The ruins answered not with words but with movement. Doors that had been sealed for eons groaned open, releasing air older than humanity's first fire. The deeper they walked, the stranger the ruins became. Machines sat in silence, their shapes beyond anything humans or aliens could design. They were not ships, not weapons, not cities, but something in between, alive yet still, waiting yet timeless. Elias touched them and felt warmth under his fingers. He closed his eyes and listened, and though no one else could hear it, he swore he felt whispers in his mind. Not voices, but questions, questions that mirrored his own. The ruins were not dead, they were waiting for someone who would dare to ask. Far across the galaxy, in the halls of the Galactic Council, alarms rang through secure chambers. Their monitors showed the ruins stirring, the forbidden planet glowing faintly as ancient systems detected intrusion. The delegates screamed in panic. "He has entered the sealed world," they cried. "He has awakened what we buried." Fear spread like wildfire, because they knew what slept beneath that desert. They knew the truth that had been locked away at the birth of their empires. If humans learned it, if curiosity unlocked it, the balance of power would shatter forever. Meanwhile, Elias pressed forward, deeper into the heart of the ruins, his crew trembling behind him. One of them shouted, "Elias, this is madness. We must leave before it is too late." But Elias turned with calm eyes and said, "Too late for what? Too late to know the truth. Too late to see what they fear if they buried this place. It is because it carries an answer, and I will not turn back when the answer is before me." His words silenced them, for there was something in his voice, a force that felt larger than the man himself, as if curiosity had made him unbreakable. The corridors opened into a vast chamber, and at its center stood a great sphere, floating above the ground, pulsing with dim light. The walls around it were filled with carvings that no translator could decipher. Yet Elias stepped closer, drawn as though by gravity. The light within the sphere pulsed faster at his presence, its glow spreading across the chamber until every stone shone. The crew fell to their knees in terror, but Elias lifted his hand, his eyes locked on the mystery. "What are you?" he whispered. "What truth do you hold?" The sphere answered. Not with sound, but with visions, Elias staggered as light flooded his mind. He saw stars forming and dying. He saw empires rising and collapsing. He saw chains of silence laid by alien rulers who feared the very knowledge he now touched. He saw that the ruins were not prisons of death, but vaults of memory, holding truths about the universe that the Council had hidden to keep power. The sphere showed him that knowledge was never destroyed, only buried, waiting for a curious mind to unearth it again. When the vision ended, Elias fell to his knees. His chest heaving, his crew rushed to him, begging to know what he had seen. But he only whispered, "They lied. Everything they told us about this galaxy is a lie, and the truth is here, waiting." His words were filled with awe and terror, and though his crew wanted to flee, part of them began to feel the same fire, the same hunger, the same dangerous curiosity that burned within him. In that moment, far away, the Council leaders declared an emergency. Fleets were ordered to move toward the Forbidden Planet. Assassins were dispatched to silence Elias before he could leave, for they knew if a human carried such truth beyond that world, then no empire, no ruler, no chain of silence would survive. They understood the Elder's warning now. This was not the danger of one man. It was the danger of what he might awaken in all of humanity. Elias stood again, his hand still glowing faintly from the touch of the sphere. He turned to his crew and said, "We cannot leave this behind. If the truth has been buried, then it must be told, no matter the cost." His voice was steady, fearless, filled with a determination that chilled and inspired in equal measure. They looked at him and saw not just a man, but a spark that could ignite stars. The forbidden discovery had been made, and the galaxy itself trembled, because for the first time in ages, silence had been broken, and curiosity had awakened something far greater than fear, the Council's dread. The chamber of the Galactic Council burned with light as thousands of delegates shouted over one another. The holographic screens above them showed Elias walking through the ruins, his body glowing faintly with the strange energy of the ancient sphere. And the sight alone was enough to turn their orderly debate into chaos. Never before had a single human caused such a storm. Never before had their carefully crafted silence been broken so boldly. The air was thick with fear and anger, and beneath it all, dread pulsed like a second heartbeat. At the center of the council sat the Elder of Scales, the same ancient voice that had warned them before. His eyes, glowing with pale fire, studied the images in silence when at last he spoke. His voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "You see now what I foretold," he said. "The danger was not armies, nor weapons, nor fleets. The danger is this human, and the fire that burns in his questions." His words stilled the chamber, for though many despised humans, none could deny the truth of what they were seeing. One delegate, a tall and feathered being from the dominion of Vale, slammed his claws against the table, his wings flaring wide in fury. "We should destroy him at once," he cried. "Send the fleets, burn the planet, leave nothing behind but dust." Murmurs of agreement echoed through the hall, the idea of swift destruction comforting those who felt the weight of fear. Yet others argued fiercely, pointing out that Elias was not just a man now, but a symbol. If we kill him, his death will echo louder than his life. A serpent-like delegate hissed, "The humans will know. They will question why. They will seek the truth he uncovered, and the fire will spread faster than ever." The chamber descended again into noise, some shouting for war, others for secrecy, some even whispering doubts about whether the council had been right to bury the ruins in the first place. That whisper was the most dangerous of all, because even here, in the heart of power, Elias's curiosity had begun to spread. The Elder of Scales rose from his throne, his massive frame towering above the chamber. Silence fell again, heavy and suffocating. "You speak of destruction," he said, his voice a low growl. "But you forget. Curiosity cannot be destroyed with fire. If you burn him, another will rise. If you silence him, his silence will speak louder than his words. The only way to end this is to bury the truth once more, deeper than before, so deep that even humanity will lose its hunger." Yet even as he spoke, doubt stirred, for they all knew humans did not lose hunger. They did not lose questions. The galaxy had seen it before. When humans were cornered in wars, they could not win. They asked how to survive, and they found a way. When they were broken by loss, they asked why. And they built hope from nothing. Humans were creatures of endless questions. And it was this endlessness that terrified the Council most of all. Reports streamed in from across the stars. Merchants whispering of colonies where humans had begun asking questions about the forbidden planet. Soldiers reporting that curiosity was spreading even in their own ranks. One general spoke with horror in his voice. "Our soldiers ask why the humans are feared. They ask why the ruins were sealed. They ask why we keep truths from them. Already the fire is burning, and we cannot stop it." His words made the chamber tremble with unease, for the danger was no longer just Elias. The danger was the idea he carried in desperation. The council began to debate darker measures. Some suggested erasing entire human colonies, silencing not just the man but his entire species. Others demanded assassins be sent to kill him quietly, leaving no trace. Still others begged for negotiation, fearing that an attack might awaken the humans' unyielding spirit of defiance. Every option felt like stepping into a trap because no matter what path they chose, curiosity seemed to slip through like smoke. The Elder of Scales turned his gaze upon them all, his voice trembling with something rarely heard in his kind. "Fear. Do you not see it is too late?" he whispered. "The truth has already been awakened, and it is walking now in the mind of a human. The most dangerous host of all, if he escapes that world. If he carries the fire with him, then all we have built will fall." His words hung like a death sentence, and though no one spoke, all felt the same terror. Far away, fleets were already mobilizing, ships of steel and shadow moving toward the forbidden planet. Their orders clear: contain Elias, erase the ruins, bury the truth again. But even as they moved, many of their soldiers whispered doubts. Why should they kill a man for asking questions? What could be so terrible that the council feared it more than war? And those questions were more dangerous than any weapon they carried, for in asking them, the soldiers themselves were becoming part of the fire. Back in the council chamber, the delegates sat in uneasy silence. No victory had been chosen, no plan truly safe. The galaxy they had ruled through silence was cracking. One man had walked into a ruin and broken chains that had held for ages, and now, no matter how they tried, they could not bind him again. The Elder of Scales lowered his head, his voice soft, almost like a prayer. "We should not fear the human alone," he said. "We should fear what he awakens in all who see him, because once the fire of curiosity burns, no force in the universe can put it out." And so the council trembled in their grand hall, while across the stars fleets moved, assassins prepared, and empires held their breath. For though they had faced wars, plagues, and rebellions, never before had they faced a threat so simple, so quiet, and yet so unstoppable, a human who dared to ask why. The awakening of the unknown. The chamber, deep within the forbidden ruins, pulsed with light, shadows stretching across walls carved with symbols no one alive could read. Elias stood at the center, the sphere before him glowing brighter with every breath he took. His hand hovered inches above its surface, and though he had touched it once already, something in the air told him this was different. This was not just discovery. This was awakening. The silence around him was heavy, Yet inside that silence he could feel movement, like the heartbeat of something far older than his kind. His crew stood behind him, torn between terror and awe. They had followed him into this cursed place against their will. Yet now, as the light wrapped around his body, they could not turn away. "Elias," one whispered, her voice trembling, "whatever this is, you must stop. You cannot know what will happen." But Elias did not move. His eyes locked on the sphere, his mind racing with questions. "What are you? Why were you buried? What truth have they tried so hard to hide?" he asked softly, his words falling into the chamber like sparks into dry wood, and the sphere responded with a low hum that shook the ground beneath their feet. Suddenly, the carvings on the walls lit up, the entire chamber coming alive with streams of blue and gold, patterns running like rivers of energy through stone that had slept for eons. The machines that had once sat silent began to stir, their surfaces glowing, their forms shifting as if waking from a dream. The crew cried out, shielding their eyes. Some fell to their knees in prayer or despair, but Elias stood tall, his face filled not with fear but with wonder, for this was the answer he had always chased. This was curiosity leading him to truth. In his mind, visions returned, more powerful than before. He saw the builders of these ruins, beings of light and thought who had stretched across galaxies long before the first alien empire rose. They had mastered knowledge so deep it bent space and time itself. But with their mastery came a question that even they could not answer. They sought truth too vast for their own minds, and so they left behind these vaults, not as prisons but as gifts, waiting for those who would dare to ask. And now, after millennia of silence, a human had asked and the ruins responded. Far above, in the cold void of space, fleets approached the planet. Council ships armed with weapons of unimaginable power, their commanders watching the glow rising from the surface with unease. Reports came in from their scouts. The ruins were stirring, ancient energy spilling into the sky, signals that had not been heard in thousands of years now echoing through the void. The council ordered them to destroy the site if necessary, to bury the truth again with fire. But the commanders hesitated, for even from orbit, they felt something strange, something vast, as if the planet itself was awakening. Inside the chamber, Elias took a step forward, his hand finally touching the sphere, and in that instant the ruins roared to life. Beams of light shot upward through the ground, piercing the skies. Spreading into space where fleets watched in horror, the surface cracked and reshaped as hidden structures rose, towers of metal and crystal breaking free from the sand, machines long buried shaking off the weight of time. The crew clung to each other, screaming, but Elias stood calm, his body bathed in radiant light, his mind filling with truths that no one had dared to hold. He saw knowledge that could heal worlds, and knowledge that could destroy them. He saw ways to bend time so that a moment could last forever. He saw ways to build machines that could turn stars into lanterns. He saw truths that frightened even him, yet the fire of curiosity in his heart did not let him turn away. The builders had locked this knowledge away because they feared it. The council had buried it because they feared it. But Elias could not fear what he was meant to learn. His very soul demanded to know. Back in the council chamber, the delegates watched the streams of light rising into the stars, their voices filled with panic. "He has awakened it," one cried. "The human has broken the silence," others screamed for immediate destruction. But the elder of scales shook his head, his voice trembling. "It is too late. The awakening has begun, and no fire of ours can smother it now." His words left them in despair, for they understood the truth. Once knowledge stirred, once questions were asked, no empire could bind them again on the planet. Elias finally turned back to his crew, his eyes glowing faintly, his face serene yet fierce. "This is what they feared," he said. "Not death, not war, but truth, and truth cannot be buried forever. It will always rise." His words struck his crew like thunder. Some wept, some trembled, but deep in their hearts a spark ignited. The same spark that had always burned in Elias. Curiosity, and though they feared it, they could not deny its pull. The ruins continued to rise, reshaping the landscape, ancient machines humming in harmony, the sky above painted with strange lights that no star had ever made. In orbit, fleets held their positions, unwilling to fire, commanders torn between duty and the primal sense that they were witnessing something sacred, something beyond their understanding. They whispered to themselves, "If this is the power of one human's curiosity, what will happen when all of humanity begins to ask?" And in that moment, across the galaxy, whispers spread faster than light, whispers of the awakening, whispers of the human who had touched forbidden truth, whispers that reached colonies, soldiers, merchants, and even children. Curiosity was no longer the fire of one man. It had begun to spread, and with every whisper the council's dread deepened. For they knew the unknown had awakened, and it had awakened in the hands of humanity. Curiosity versus control. The awakening of the ruins spread waves of energy across the stars. Signals too old for modern machines to understand rippled through the void, and every empire felt the tremor. In distant academies, alien scholars fainted as their archives began to unlock themselves. Scrolls and crystals that had resisted translation for centuries suddenly glowed with meaning. On forgotten moons, silent vaults cracked open, revealing machines that stirred for the first time in ages. All of it had been sealed. All of it had been locked away. But now, Elias's touch had undone what the Council thought permanent. The Galactic Council watched these changes in horror, their fleets already circling the forbidden planet, commanders demanding new orders. Some were ready to unleash fire and erase everything. Others hesitated, unwilling to destroy what they barely understood. The Elder of Scales stood again before the delegates, his voice sharp. "We must decide now," he roared. "If we wait longer, curiosity will spread beyond control. If humans see too much, they will ask too many questions, and when they do, our age of silence will end." His words filled the chamber with dread, but also with division, for even among the delegates, a dangerous thing had begun: doubt. Some of them asked quietly, "What if the humans are meant to know? What if the truths we buried should not have been locked away?" These whispers were quickly silenced, but they lingered in the hearts of many. The Council had built their power not only on armies, but on fear and control of knowledge. They had ruled by telling races what not to ask, what not to touch, what not to learn. But Elias had broken that pattern. He had proven that the forbidden was not impossible. And now even rulers began to wonder if their foundation was made of lies. On the surface of the planet, Elias stood tall beneath towers of glowing crystal and steel, his crew trembling behind him. He could feel the weight of the awakening in his very bones, knowledge flowing through him like rivers of light. He turned to his people and spoke with steady voice. "They will come for us now," he said. "They fear not the ruins, but what we will become after knowing them." His crew nodded, fear in their eyes, but also something more. Curiosity had touched them as well, and though they dreaded what was to come, they could not deny that they too hungered to know more. Far above, fleets began to descend, their engines roaring like thunder across the sky. The earth trembled as ships the size of cities broke through the clouds, their weapons glowing, their shadows covering the ruins. The crew cried out in terror, knowing they were hopelessly outmatched. But Elias only narrowed his eyes. He had no fleet, no army, no weapon, and yet he felt no defeat, for he carried something greater than firepower. He carried the one thing they could not control, the one thing they could not bury. Curiosity. The Council ordered his death. Assassins sent ahead of the fleets descended into the ruins, cloaked and armed. They expected fear. They expected surrender, but Elias met them calmly. He asked them questions no one had ever asked. "Do you know what you are fighting for? Do you know why they forbid knowledge? Do you know what they have hidden from you?" His words struck the assassins like arrows. They faltered, their weapons shaking, for none of them had ever asked such things. They had followed orders. They had killed without thought. But in that moment, his questions spread doubt into their hearts, and doubt was poison to control. When one of the assassins dropped his blade and fell to his knees, The others followed, not in loyalty but in confusion. Elias did not command them. He only asked more questions. Why do you obey silence? Why do you kill for lies? Why not see for yourself? And in that instant, the ruins answered again, beams of light flowing outward, touching not just Elias and his crew, but even the assassins, filling their minds with visions, showing them the vast truths buried across the galaxy. The assassins screamed, not in pain but in awakening, for they understood now, and they could never return to silence again. This was what the Council feared most. Not death, not destruction, but infection. The infection of curiosity. Elias was like a flame that lit every mind he touched, and those minds spread fire to others. The Council's control had been built on chains of silence, but now the chains were breaking, and with every break, their power weakened in desperation. They ordered the fleets to fire, to burn the ruins, to kill Elias and erase everything. But the commanders hesitated again, for they too had seen the lights in the sky. They too had heard whispers, and curiosity had begun to stir even in them. Back in the chamber of the council, chaos reigned, delegates shouting, threats flying, fear thick as smoke. The Elder of Scales roared above them all. Do you not see control is slipping from our grasp? Every moment we wait, every question asked, every whisper spread weakens us. Soon not even our fleets will obey, and when that happens, our age is over. His words shook them, yet many knew it was already too late. The more they tried to control, the more curiosity resisted on the planet below. Elias stood under the shadow of warships, his crew and the assassins now beside him, united by the same spark. He raised his voice to the skies. You can kill me, but you cannot kill what has begun. You can bury me, but you cannot bury the questions. They will rise again. They will rise in every human, and in every being who dares to ask why. His voice echoed through the ruins, carried upward with the beams of light, spreading across the galaxy like thunder, and so the battle was no longer fought with weapons, but with ideas. Curiosity stood against control, questions against silence, and for the first time, the Council trembled not at the sight of war fleets, but at the sound of a single human voice asking what they could never answer. The universe changes. Forever, the galaxy held its breath as the ruins blazed like a second sun, beams of light shooting across the heavens, carrying whispers of truth into every corner of the stars. In every outpost, every colony, every council world, those who looked up at the sky saw patterns they did not understand. And yet their hearts stirred. It was as though something inside them remembered. Something long buried was awakening within them. The Council tried to send messages of control, ordering silence, demanding obedience. But their words fell flat. For once curiosity was ignited. Commands became weak and hollow. Elias stood at the center of it all, surrounded by his crew, the assassins who had once come to kill him now standing as allies, and the ruins glowing around them like a cathedral of light. He felt the weight of knowledge pressing against his mind, visions still flooding through him, truths too vast for one man to carry. Yet he did not collapse, he did not falter. He stood strong, because he understood this was no longer about him alone. He was not chosen to keep the fire, he was chosen to spread it. And the fire had already leapt from him into countless others. In orbit above, the fleets trembled, commanders staring at the planet with unease, their weapons primed but their hearts heavy. Orders screamed through their channels, fire, erase him, bury the ruins, but the commanders hesitated. For the first time in memory, soldiers disobeyed. They asked questions of their leaders. They asked why this human was feared. They asked what truth had been hidden. And once the question formed, it could not be undone. Fleets built to enforce silence were now divided, their loyalty crumbling under the simplest of doubts. Back in the Grand Council chamber, panic turned into despair. Delegates shouted at one another, some demanding stronger action, others falling into hopeless silence. The Elder of Scales raised his voice above them all, his ancient form trembling with rage and fear. You do not see, he roared, this is the end. Not of our lives, but of our rule. The humans have broken the one law that held the galaxy together. They have shown that truth cannot be caged. They have shown that silence can be broken. And no matter what we do now, the fire will spread. It is already too late." His words struck the chamber like thunder, and though many wanted to deny it, they felt the truth. On distant worlds, humans began to rise, inspired not by weapons but by questions. They sought ruins hidden on their own colonies. They asked their rulers why certain knowledge was forbidden. They defied laws that forbade exploration. They broke chains with nothing but curiosity. And they were not alone, for aliens too began to stir. Soldiers who had once obeyed without thought now wondered why their masters feared the humans. Scholars who had been silenced now dared to speak again. Merchants who traded in shadows now whispered of the truths Elias had touched. It was as though the entire galaxy had been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone to remind them that silence was not natural, that to ask and to learn was the true nature of life. Elias knew fleets would still come. Assassins would still hunt. The Council would not surrender quietly, but he also knew something greater. Victory was no longer about survival. Victory was about infection. Curiosity had infected the stars, and no fire, no fleet, no law could burn it out. He turned to his crew, their faces lit by the glow of the ruins. "We are not fighting to win," he said softly. "We are fighting to remind the universe of what it forgot. Once a question is asked, it can never be unasked. And once a truth is found, it can never be buried again." His words were carried outward, amplified by the ruins themselves, echoing through channels and frequencies no machine could block. His voice spreading across systems faster than any fleet. The Council fleets still hovered above, torn between duty and doubt, but then something remarkable happened. A single ship broke formation, its lights dimming as it turned away, then another followed and then another. Entire divisions peeling off and vanishing into the void, refusing to fire, refusing to obey. Commanders gave no explanations, they simply acted, driven by the same spark that had touched them when they saw the lights in the sky. The fleets that remained were no longer strong enough to overwhelm, and those that left carried whispers of rebellion back to their worlds. The Elder of Scales sat in silence, his voice gone, his eyes dim. He had lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. But never had he feared anything more than this. He had feared human strength, human courage, human defiance, but now he understood the true reason the galaxy should fear humans. It was not their weapons. It was not their wars. It was their endless hunger to know, to ask, to learn, and once awakened, that hunger could not be silenced, he whispered to himself. Unheard by others, we were wrong. The most dangerous thing in the universe was never a weapon. It was always curiosity, and humans carry it as though it is their birthright. On the Forbidden World, the ruins continued to blaze, but Elias no longer felt alone across the galaxy. Countless minds had joined him, countless voices rising, not in unison, but in harmony, a chorus of questions echoing through the stars. The fire of curiosity had spread beyond his control, beyond the Council's reach, beyond the limits of fear. The universe had changed, not through war or conquest, but through the awakening of a simple truth. And so, in that moment, the galaxy crossed a boundary it could never return from. The age of silence was broken. The age of questions had begun, and at its heart stood a human, not with an army at his back, not with a weapon in his hand, but with curiosity burning in his soul. The Council whispered in despair, the empires trembled, and the stars themselves seemed to sing, for the universe would never be the same again.